Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for this first in a series of webinars that we'll be sharing with you throughout this month. Before we dig into the latest and greatest genetic updates, I just want to let everyone know that we'll have you muted throughout the session, and then there'll be plenty of time at the end for you to ask questions at that point. You also have the option to type out your questions if you prefer to ask them on the fly. And we'll make sure we either answer those as they come in or else come back to them once we're finished with the presentation. So with that, let's get started. So today is proof day, or sire summaries or genetic evaluation updates. Whatever you want to call it, we get new data today on bulls and cows and heifers and all animals, all dairy animals that help us make current genetic selection decisions. And they help you make current selection decisions that will impact your herd for years to come. And this time, in addition to the new data on bulls, it's also time for a genetic base change. And we'll dig into what exactly that means here in the next few minutes. So the base change, the genetic base change happens every 5 years. And it's done periodically just to make sure that we bring our baseline and our reference numbers back to realistic numbers. In fact, the base changes happened and been done every 5 years since 1980. The base change means that we set the PTAs, or the predicted transmitting abilities, for a new reference population back to 0. Since the last base change, which happened 5 years ago, our reference population has been the cows that were born in 2010. Now, with this updated base change, we're resetting the PTA values for the average cow born in 2015 back to 0. So cows born in 2015 are becoming our new reference population. The third point we want to make is that the amount that each trait or index changes is how we actually quantify the actual amount of genetic progress that we've made since the last base change. We'll get into the specifics in a moment on what that means and what those numbers are and how we quantify that. But the amount of the rollback essentially is how much better the genetic value for each breed has gotten for each respective trait over the past 5 years. In general, for most traits, when they roll back, or AKA a downward adjustment, that just means we've actually made progress for that trait. In fact, the bigger the adjustment, the more progress we've made. And a key thing to remember is that the base change itself does not impact the ranking or the relative ranking of animals, not one bit. If they implemented the base change separate from a proof day, no animals would change their ranking, not for a particular trait and not for a particular index. All animals would just be rolled back the same amount, which, remember, is a good thing if it rolls back. The re-ranking that you might see from a new proof day comes from other genetic information, adding daughter information for production, health, or conformation, or because of things like the TPI formula update for the Holstein breed, which we'll also get into a little bit later. So what are the changes that we'll see? In the next few slides, we're going to dig into them a little bit. So the first table that you'll see next is going to outline the key changes that you can see in the Holstein breed. We'll just show some of the basic traits here, but you can find additional trait changes on our website after this webinar if you're looking for more details. So from 2015 through today, cows are more productive, they're healthier, and with a better physical makeup. But how much more productive are they, or how much healthier are they? Like we mentioned, that amount of progress is quantified by these actual base change numbers that you see here. Now, please note that these adjustments are estimates that the CDCB had shared in advance of proofs, so the actual adjustments may vary slightly, but this is going to give you a pretty good indication of what these base changes are. So for production, all exceptional improvements. which means we're making more productive, more efficient cows. So a base change of 492, or let's say about 500 pounds for milk, means that all animals are going to have their PTA value for milk dropped back by about 500 pounds to account for the genetic progress that we've made for that trait. And the same goes for fat and protein, about 25 pounds for fat and 20 pounds of protein. Now if we look at the health traits, you can also see favorable changes for productive life, DPR, somatic cell score, and sire calving ease. Keep in mind that even though there's a negative sign in front of somatic cell score and sire calving ease, that's actually a good thing, since those traits are ones where a lower number is more favorable. So when we're looking at proofs, the numbers are actually going to be adjusted upward, and that's a good thing. In addition to the base change for sire calving ease, this trait will also become more accurate based on an adjustment to the trait. So again, in addition to the base change, CDCB is also adjusting slightly how they code sire calving ease, and excluding herds that code all of their calvings as a 1, which is very easy, since that assumes that they're not actually coding accurately, rather they're just putting in a default standard or standard value at that farm. And in addition, 4 and 5, instead of being separate calving ease scores, will now be combined into one number. So 4 used to be a really hard calving, needing assistance, and 5 essentially was needing to have a C-section. So those two numbers will be combined into one, and that will improve the accuracy of the sire calving ease trait going forward. As we look at the conformation traits, you'll see type, udder composite, and foot and leg composite all made improvements. And then when you put that together with the industry standard index like net merit, you can see an overall breed adjustment of about 230 net merit dollars solely from the base change. That means if you compare a bull's April net merit to his December net merit, they'll be about 230 net merit dollars lower than they were in December, but that's just based on the base change. And these adjustments are a good thing, but it's also important to compare them to adjustments we made previously, so we can see, did we make more progress in the past 5 years or less progress? So with that, the next table you'll see compares the differences between this base change and the previous one. So the top row on this table shows the current base changes for some of those key traits that we're talking about for production and health traits. And the bottom line shows the adjustments that were made in the previous base change. And remember, each base change quantifies how much genetic progress we've made in the 5 years preceding. So you can see without me telling you that we've made more progress this past 5 years than in the previous 5 years before that. And that accounts for production and health traits here, as well as the industry standard net merit that is shown here. Some of the other traits were more relatively equal on progress from 2015 to 2020 as compared to 2010 to 2015, but these key production values have all made more progress in the past 5 years than they did in the 5 years before that. So you can see you've been continually getting more genetic bang for your buck in the Holstein breed. But there's also changes for the other breeds. We'll just dig into Holsteins, but keep in mind there are base changes for all other dairy breeds as well. So next up, let's take a look at what the genetic base changes are for the Jersey breed. You can see that for this breed, the Jerseys actually made more progress for production traits than the Holsteins did. They also improved for productive life, So that means that cows are going to stay in the herd healthy and producing for 1.5 months longer than previously. And the Jersey breed stayed consistent on somatic cell score. However, as noted is the red DPR figure here, the breed actually made backwards progress for daughter fertility. That extreme progress for the production traits comes at the cost of fertility. And so the breed has made negative progress by about 1 point of DPR. So that means instead of a DPR value rolling back on the Jersey breed, it's actually going to be increased by about 1 point for every animal this proof round. The breed also made great progress for type and udder composite. In addition, the base adjustments for net merit and cheese merit roll back by nearly 200 net merit or cheese merit dollars, meaning that that's about the profitability difference now versus 5 years ago with this breed. And just like we did with the Holstein breed, we also want to compare the differences between this base change and the previous base change. Okay, so you can see that table pulled up again with the traits, the base change adjustments for the Jersey breed. So again, the top row is the current approximate base change figures, and the bottom row is the base change adjustments that were made 5 years ago. Again, we've made a lot more progress for milk, fat, and protein than we did last time. So we made progress between 2010 and 2015, but we've made even more progress, like 1.5 times more progress in the past 5 years than in the 5 years before that. Productive life is the same way. We about doubled the amount of progress for productive life this past 5 years than the 5 years before that. We've already discussed DPR, which is a little bit different story, but again, somatic cell score is stayed constant, which means it's better than it was the previous 5 years before that. So milk quality should be improving. And despite the fact on fertility, because of those huge gains in production, the total lifetime net merit improved nearly $70 more over the past 5 years than the 5 years before that. So what does this mean for you? So just as a reminder, all bulls are changed by the same amount. Again, if we would take the base change just on its own, all bulls, all cows, all heifers change by the same amount just based on the base change. And that means that these baseline reference levels will be different. So for example, in the Holstein breed, if you were using 1,000 net merit bulls in the past, the new reference level for those high net merit bulls is going to be more like 800. And those are going to be the high net merit bulls. What also happens with a base change is that these some of the bulls that are near or around thresholds that you might use, so say a bull drops just below 1,000 pounds of milk, or to be minus 0.1 for daughter pregnancy rate, there's a good chance that that bull actually isn't any different for those traits than he was in December, but it's just different thresholds that are in place. And so you may need to keep those in mind, and thresholds can be a dangerous thing. So just make sure that you're evaluating with the new baseline reference levels in mind, so that you don't miss out on genetics that could actually be a perfect fit for your current situation and future goals. So that's a quick recap of the genetic base change that's happening this time, and is going to be cause for a lot of differences that you're going to see in the proofs and the new proof numbers and trait values on the bulls that you'll be selecting for your herd. But now the next few slides that we'll go through, we'll talk about the TPI formula update. And this is, of course, only relevant to those who are breeding Holsteins or who have a Holstein herd. But we'll dig into the differences, because if TPI is your genetic index or your genetic plan of choice, there are some adjustments that may impact the ranking of bulls, and you just need to be aware of those if that's how you choose the bulls that you use. So there's 4 key pieces that we want to go over as the updates for the TPI formula. So the first one that probably could have the greatest impact on affecting sire ranking for the TPI formula specifically would be that the fat to protein ratio is now equal. So previously, protein was weighted at 21% of the total TPI formula, and fat was weighted at 17%. But because of market conditions and how dairy producers are paid for milk solids, this equal weighting on fat and protein is now what makes more sense in this formula. So that means that bulls with extra high fat values will likely improve their TPI ranking, and bulls with extra high protein and lower fat may drop in their rank with no other factors considered. The second point to consider is that the CDCB health traits, which there's 6 of them, and together they're going to form the CDCB health trait index. And those 6 traits are resistance for mastitis, ketosis, retained placenta, metritis, displaced abomasum, and milk fever. And these CDCB health traits have been published in the Holstein breed since 2018, but now they're just getting added to the TPI formula. And together, those 6 traits, again, will make this health trait index, which will be weighted at 2% of the total value within TPI. The third point to note is about foot and leg composite. So that foot and leg composite will now be improved with the addition of rear leg side view to that composite index. The total weight on foot and leg composite within TPI is going to stay the same, but now includes rear leg side view. I think many producers have noticed how the leg set of the Holstein breed as a whole has become more posty over the years. And so adding rear leg side view is intended to help correct and bring the leg set of these animals back to a more optimal medium. And the last of the 4 key points to note is that there's a shift in the category weights of TPI. So when we talk about genetic plans or indexes, we can group all of the traits into one of 3 categories or buckets. One of them is the production traits. The second is the health category, which we include health, fertility, and calving traits with that. And the third is the conformation category or type. And so the new TPI formula shifts 1% of the total weight from conformation over to health. So what does that mean for that overall formula for a TPI? Let's take a closer look at the current versus the previous TPI formula. So you can see that production hasn't changed. The new TPI formula still has 46% total weight on production. Again, we've reallocated how fat and protein and how that ratio is adjusted, but it's still the same total weight within the 100% of the formula. And then where the difference comes is just that minor 1% shift. So there's 1% less weight on conformation and 1% more weight on health traits now. And here the next part that will pop up will be the actual trait breakdowns within TPI. You'll see the highlighted pieces are the ones that, the pieces that are highlighted are going to be the indexes or the trait values that have shifted weight or something within that category. So you can see pounds of fat, pounds of protein, the weighting on those within TPI is updated. So instead of higher value on protein and less on fat, they're now equal weighted. We've also highlighted feed efficiency here, as that's another update that has been included with the TPI formula. The economic values for cheese merit within the feed efficiency formula have been updated. And so feed efficiency has always been weighted at 8% within the formula. but now it will be updated with the economic values appropriately. When we move to the health trait category, you can see we've highlighted fertility index as well. That was weighted at 13% previously and will still be weighted at 13%, but it now includes a new trait called early first calving. Also in the health trait index, you'll see somatic cell score has decreased by 1% weight. So somatic cell score used to have a weighting of 5%, but now is down to 4%, which can stay logical because within the CDCB health trait index that is new to the health category, there's the effect for resistance to mastitis within that. And so there's still essentially the same selection intensity for somatic cell score and resistance to mastitis as previous. Productive life also has a 1% increased weight from before, and that's where that 29% on the health trait category comes into play as compared to 28 previously. So that 1% on productive life is coming from dairy form, which you'll see no longer has any weight in the TPI formula. In addition, we've highlighted in green the CDCB health index, as that's a new trait to the health category. And then daughter calving ease, being closely related to what those metabolic diseases that cows can get at calving are caused, now has 1% less weight than previously. And lastly, with conformation, again, dairy form has no weighting, and foot and leg composite stays weighted at 6%. So that total weighting does not change from previously to current, but just with the addition of rear leg side view included. And then in addition to these changes with the TPI formula, they've also included an adjustment factor in the formula with how they calculate the total number or the final TPI value. And that comes with the base change so that it makes it more easy to compare TPI values over time. So while you'll notice that net merit dollars, net merit, cheese merit, those formulas are all dropping back by about $200 or 200 net merit dollars, TPI is going to stay relatively constant for since it accounts for those for the base change adjustment. So with all that in mind, the base change simply means that we need to change our frame of reference for the various traits and industry indexes, except for TPI, which is accounted for, and will stay relatively constant for that actual value. An actual update to the formula of an industry standard index means it's a good reminder to do periodic reviews on the genetic plan you have in place on your dairy as well. If you're using TPI, it's important to make sure you know what's included so that you can make sure that the genetics you keep selecting continue to match your farm's current situation and future goals. And one last point before we can get to questions, excuse me. If you want to see how and why to implement a customized genetic plan or implement that process on your farm, we hope you'll join us on Facebook Live at 2 p.m. this Thursday. One of our expert genetic consultants, Jim Powers, will be live on our Alta Facebook feed on site at a dairy he works with to discuss the genetic planning process and how that looks for a farm. So with that, thank you for your time and attention. We'll look through if there's any questions that have been typed out, or I'll also unmute so that if anybody has a question they'd like to ask, feel free. I see a question that said, did net merit change too? And the formula for net merit did not change, but the base, the genetic base for the net merit formula did roll back. Doesn't look like I can unmute everyone. But if there are any other questions, feel free to raise your hand on here and I can try and unmute you as well, or feel free to type it into the question section.
Hi, Chrissy. We have another question that's been typed in. It is, how come TPI value has not changed and net merit value went down for $200? It was entered earlier in the meeting discussion, so you may have answered that already.
Right. No, good question. Like we mentioned, the TPI does have this adjustment factor included. So net merit is kind of a straight up economic value calculated based on traits and current economic situations. Whereas TPI has also, like this, again, it's called an adjustment factor that they add in after they calculate the formula. And so with a base change, they update that adjustment factor so that it's easier to compare TPI values over time. So for TPI, expect the levels to remain essentially constant to what you're used to seeing for TPI values on the bulls that you might use or the females that you work with. But net merit will be lower because of the base adjustment for that and no adjustment factor included.
And then we have one more TPI related question, and it is, the TPI changes or increases, are they just because of the formula?
The TPI increases?
Mm-hmm.
Overall, there shouldn't, I don't know that there should be necessarily an overall increase in TPI. If you would look across the breed as a whole, like the difference of the weighting in pounds of fat versus protein will for sure have an impact on bulls. So depending, you'll have to look at what their protein and fat levels are, and that could adjust how their ranking is. And again, bulls that are higher for fat probably will go up in their TPI value. And that's one aspect of it. Same with the CDCB health index, with that being added in as a new trait at 2%. Bulls with favorable levels for those CDCB health traits could see a gain in their TPI value.
Okay, and then we have another question from Philip this time. How much reshuffling did we see with the new FLC calculations?
That I don't know the answer for that right offhand. We'll have to do a little bit more digging into the actual levels of these bulls, and I can for sure get back to you on that after we've been able to look into it a little bit further. Good question.
And we do have a question from Ben, just reiterating again, why is the base change important and why do we need to change the reference population?
So the base change is important to keep, again, these realistic levels and expectations for genetic values. If we didn't do a base change adjustment every 5 years, we would be having bulls with several $1,000s of net merit and 10,000 pounds of milk, which are not realistic levels when you consider management also plays a role.
Okay. And then one more question here for daughter pregnancy rate value. Why should that be lower, or what does it mean?
That probably is in reference, I'm going to assume that's in reference to the Jersey breed. So DPR, we actually do want a higher value for DPR. A higher value means cows get pregnant more quickly. And with the Jersey breed, because they've actually made negative or backwards progress for fertility, that's why they will have, that's why there was the negative adjustment, which we showed in red to highlight that it was a backwards, kind of backwards or negative progress. So for DPR, we do want a higher level for DPR, but with the Jersey breed, they will be adjusted upward because they've made negative progress. So it's kind of backwards that way. I see one other question about a change in fluid merit. I don't believe that there's been a change in how fluid merit dollars is calculated, but just like net merit and cheese merit, it's going to have a rollback of a similar amount of about 200 fluid merit dollars is what all bulls will roll back because of the base change, but I'm unaware if there is an actual change in how that's calculated. All right, are there any other questions that anyone has?
I think there's just one in the comment section that we haven't addressed, and it is, do you have the numbers? What is the base milk level now?
Well, the base change for Holsteins, like I guess we have the base change numbers, but I would have to dig in to find if there is a base level for milk. I mean, the reference level for, so what, with the base change, the reference population is set to 0 for these traits. So the reference population being those cows born in 2015, they're set to 0 for milk. Hopefully that answers that question.
I think that's it, Chrissy.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Thank you everybody for joining, for your attention, for your great questions as well. This webinar will be recorded and there will be, again, we have a series of webinars coming up, so there'll be more scheduled for the rest of this month as well. So with that, thank you again.